Hello, I'm Dr.
Hello.
Lisa College and welcome to Culture by Neurodesign. Today I'm planning to explore the systems and team conditions that really bring out the best in creative, fast-moving minds, and also explore what can get in the way of those same minds. And I'm delighted to be doing that in discussion with Nick Cawthon. Nick, thanks very much for joining me today.
Hello, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
Most welcome. Would you kick us off, Nick, by introducing yourself to our listeners, please?
Yeah, I'm Nick. I'm living in the San Francisco Bay Area and have been for most of my life. I am in the field of user experience, and I'll take you way back as we are now winding down summer here in Northern California. A lot of my time has been spent picking up and dropping off kids at summer camps. And I remember when I was a little kid going to a summer camp, sitting around the table in some church basement with my peers and what other mom was responsible for maintaining our attention, put down a bunch of paper and gave us some pens and allowed us to do some drawing. And at the time, I was interested in World War II dogfights between Spitfires and Messerschmitts. And I remember sort of focusing on getting this drawing down. And as I look back now, I think it was one of the earliest notions of a flow state that I've ever had, where when I picked my head up and I looked around and I looked down at my paper and I thought, wow, this is really good. I really like this. And where did that 20 minutes go? And it's weird now that I'm sort of 40 years past that date. And I still remember that 20 minutes of just a simple exercise of drawing on a piece of paper and how it fundamentally shifted what I do for a living. I consider myself very lucky to have that recognition and reflection, as well as to continue that thread on into what became graphic design, what became interaction design, and what became user experience design. And now it's becoming something completely different with the advent of new technologies and tools. So that was a brief origin story that took you all the way back to all the way forward. But let's start from there.
Wow. Yeah, I wanted to get into what the common thread was amongst all of the different experiences that you've had, and then I know a bit about because we've talked before. I mean, have you been constantly questing to rediscover that feeling of flow that you described when you were Messerschmitts? Is that it, or is there more to it as well?
You know, there's moments in your life where you realize, oh, this is what they were talking about. I don't think I was younger than maybe 25, 30 before I realized what being dehydrated meant. Like maybe I just wasn't very good at physical therapy or things like that. Like I didn't quite know these physiological reactions, whether they be mental in terms of creative and flow state, or whether it be physical. And you kind of go through life hearing about things, but it's not until you experience them that that flip switches and you start to discover. And I think a lot of us, we try to spend our lives trying to rediscover that flow status, which is especially difficult in today's era of distraction and attention, that commodity. And I also have a recognition of what gave me pride and what gave me satisfaction to think that, if I did this for a week at summer camp, that would be a lot of fun. I wouldn't mind more of this. And was fortunate enough to have an upbringing in which that was encouraged, and hope to do so again for my kids.
Lovely. Yeah, just sounds like a wonderful way to spend a summer, just doing something that you love.
Yeah,
you clearly have a very creative mind, whether it's drawing Messerschmitts or whatever else, and a love of being in the flow, as everybody does who's been lucky enough to experience that condition. And I'd love to just spend a bit of time exploring what it is that puts you in that state, in the flow, beyond drawing aeroplanes 40 years ago. So yeah. If you imagine yourself in the flow, can you find other common elements that put you there amongst the kind of work that you're doing, or the team environment that you're in, or whatever it may be?
Yeah, I think the word flow is a really apt descriptor, because you are letting the process take its course. So continuing on the path of the young kid, now sort of transforming into a college graduate, where I was going to art school and realizing what it meant to have an assignment that you were able to interpret and execute however you wanted. You know, it was an art school, and this was a graduate degree, but to continue that into my own work, when you have an RFP or you have an assignment from a client or a boss, to say, how will I interpret this? How will I read between the lines of what's being asked and make it interesting enough so that I don't mind spending weeks or months doing this? Because, you know, there's nothing worse than the routine of, oh, this is just all commonplace without the challenge. And that puts myself into a flow state of figuring something out, going into areas that are unknown or uncomfortable, and having that as a constant learning environment. You know, there's nothing I fear more than complacency of just sort of doing the same thing over and over again. And so it's not until I put myself into a challenging environment and see progress in it, does that flow state return.
Wow, that's I mean, what you're describing about school, that's really different to how I found it, right? I used to hate it when a teacher would say, you know, just write about anything or whatever about anything. That lack of structure was difficult for me. I love it now, actually. I love also, like you're describing, being able to find your way to address a particular challenge if that challenge is clearly defined. Yeah. But yeah, I used to hate it in school. It's amazing how people enjoy different things.
Yeah, the structure is what I was challenging. Where if any structure was provided, it's like, oh, okay, well, you know, they didn't say how to get to this point. I've just come off of a client engagement, and it was a repeat client in which I had come back after 18 months away and saw what I had delivered last time. This is a product design, and it was handed over to an engineering team and dropped on the floor because they didn't have the prioritization or the resources to implement the grand vision, I will call it. And I said, you know, I'm not going to do this again. I'm not going to do the same methods that I did last time and expect a different result. That was sort of Einstein's famous statement of, you know, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. But it's not like I asked my client permission to deliver a different commodity to them. Whereas last time I took this method, this time I'm going to do a different method. And this was bringing in all sorts of conversations about AI and using generative tools and rejecting the tool set that we once knew. It was something that I saw as license to say, here's how we can improve. And it's a constant, it's the Ouroboros of the snake eating its own tail, of saying, here's something you'd be comfortable with doing, but in my opinion, the outcome wasn't very good, and so let's now just burn those bridges mentally and force yourself to learn new tools with the same sort of skill set and sort of prioritization and abilities, but now done completely different. So that's my comfort zone, is being uncomfortable and challenging the structure which I've been given.
Yeah, that's really. But I think for some people, describing that kind of situation as a comfort zone would feel quite confronting, right? I mean, what you're talking about, this mental bridge burning, trying something new, really seeking out new things that you haven't tried before. You probably have a good idea that they're gonna work better than what you've experienced before, but you don't know for sure. And that's quite risky as well, in a way. And I think some people would probably run a mile from that, and they have different skills. But do you find that you come across a lot of people who are more risk averse than you in the work?
Yes, in work and in life. I often this notion of regret, that's another emotion or state that you don't learn later in life. Regret is something that starts to take shape, you know, as you mature, because when you're young, there is no history or timeline to look back and think, maybe I should or would have been that. But you know, as that emotion of regret started to come more and more into my mind space, there's a notion of I regret not doing it differently, or not going harder, or challenging this notion. But that's one thing that I've been living with in the last year. I've had a milestone birthday. For those of you who are listening at home versus watching, I'll let you guess which one it is by the number of gray hairs in my beard. And there's this notion of regret of like, I should have done this professionally, or I could have done that. I would have bet my chips a little bit differently if had I seen this before. And so I do, even though my role or characterization is a disruptor or a chaos agent, or somebody who comes in as an outside consultant to challenge and to hopefully innovate, that can come with regret of not doing enough or not going as far as you would like to have.
Yeah. Are there particular types of work that you're really bad at or really hate doing?
Taxes, payroll, meeting notes. I think that as a proprietor for my corporation, I was required to take monthly notes of what decisions were made at the organization. And so those I'm very bad at, is that constant. Yeah, I've never missed a payroll, but that's because it's all automated. And I've got good people that work with me to keep my books in line. So yeah, those are things that I look bad at. To continue to offer vulnerability, I have regret, or I have sort of self-criticism about funnel. For those of us who are in business for themselves, they have to have these conversations come in so that they are meeting new people and exploring new areas and making contacts and connections, and that those someday turn into business arrangements, whatever that might be. And I've always been so disappointed with my ability to generate funnel. And what I've told myself is that I am good at maintaining long-term relationships that are real and valuable, that aren't anonymous or cold, but that have been nurtured and maintained over time. When you are my friend, we remain friends forever, and they don't rotate in and out of my lives. They are always something that's maintainable. And I need to alleviate that concern over the automated funnel flow with, no, you've got people who know and trust you and have returned to you as clients, and you balance that out. So those are two examples of the things that I perceive myself bad at, but also have methods to alleviate that challenge.
Yeah. And what is it about them? Do you know? Is it like when you started talking about taxes and payroll, I thought, is it the numerical aspect of it? But now I'm wondering if it's the structured aspect or the repetitiveness, or is it something else that you?
It's dealing with the federal government.
Right.
It's the archaic processes, and the amount of lag between when you make a request and when you see action can happen over months, and that is a difficult service. It's the most difficult thing I do, is deal with the government. I also am very bad at getting on the telephone. I don't know what it is, but I want to have my headphones on. I want to be in my flow state. I want to have hands on a keyboard, and context switching like that, just now dial somebody on the phone, has been a very archaic method of communication that has not been my strong suit.
Interesting. Do you I'm thinking, does anybody actually like engaging with the federal government? Maybe nobody really loves it with a passion, but there are probably people in the world who don't dislike it as much as you do.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Yeah. Do you actively seek people out who don't mind it so much, who don't mind waiting so long for a result?
Yeah,
with that stuff.
Yeah. I have a business development rep that our first week of working together, I was like, look, I really am bad at this. I don't know if it's something that that's going to see any value in terms of outreach. But I as well as I'm doing some nonprofit work in event organizing.
Yeah.
And when it comes time to call the city and check the permit and do the things that require a phone call, I always default to email, and that feels like it checks a box on my list. But personal relationships are better when they're communicated over phone.
Yeah. Now I'm wondering if you think about not doing work on your own, but working with others, if you find that there are particular types of minds that are easier to work with, more comfortable to work with, more likely to put you in that flow state, and the opposite, that are likely to send you into a frustrated state, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the mindset, but it might have been the industry. I tend to work well with engineers, those who are structured in their thoughts. Engineers tend to not be as sort of superfluous and much more exact. And I think those complement well, where we can, think about a problem and many different ways into it. And then once we get into it, it's like, how do we achieve it? And that has sort of paralleled my career quite a bit of working at engineering focused companies. This may also be a gender thing where I can be like a guy's designer and sort of have that, the sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Machoist. Is that correct? Like there's certainly a bro culture to all of that. And that's been something that I've come into and out of quite a bit in my career.
Right. I mean, it's something that you encounter more often, that people of a particular style, like you're talking about, very creative style, very kind of immediate style. You want to see immediate impact and immediate answers, or you like it. That people are well complemented by those with other styles. In this case, engineers. I mean, are there particular things about a typical engineer style of working that you hate or irritates you?
I've been working on this assessment survey. This goes back to the conversation about the top of the funnel, as well as the story on innovating or disrupting this design team after coming into it a few months away and doing a different method.
Yeah.
Where I saw that there were these designers that were using the same practice that I did, and that their jobs were going to be at risk because of AI, because of generative tools, and that they were very much pushing pixels in their own way.
Right.
And so I designed this survey or this assessment for organizations to get a sense of their readiness and their adoption and barriers and roadblocks, and sort of behavioral science exercise to try to segment and cluster. We're seeing these companies say this and these companies say that. And it is, it is partially because I want to invest into back into my community, and it's also because I want to start to meet people who are willing to disrupt. And I mentioned that reference of bookkeeping or meeting notes, and because I've been handed the tools to again these generative coding tools as a designer, I don't know what I'm doing, but I can sort of work with it and mold it and shape it, and then get it to a point where, as of this morning, it's finally working. But in order to do these, it's been a month. In order to do these things, you've got to understand engineering principles, and that means checking in your version control and watching out for merge conflicts and understanding this sort of rigor that engineers know by default, so that they can roll back, so that they can sort of move forward and back. And I've gotten washed downstream like a salmon 3 or 4 times because I wasn't good at that, because I didn't do that well, and I was going into new areas and things were broken and I didn't know how to fix them, and I couldn't roll back to a point where I understood. And so that's sort of a culmination of a couple different stories of, I went and I saw this environment, and I have empathy for those who are going to be left behind. And I wanted to, again, create this sort of outbound, here we are as a community in our adoption, here are some fears that we have, and here are some progress that we've seen. And then in order to do so, pushing myself into a world of what's called vibe coding, that is something that's sort of exposing some of my weaknesses and making me a better person to try to keep everything together as we move forward into the unknown.
Yeah. Wow, I mean, you're really pushing yourself into different situations, right? Whether you're choosing to address problems in different ways, or putting yourself like literally in situations where you are uncomfortable because maybe you don't have that natural skill set or whatever.
You don't choose who is on the other side of the phone of what they want, and it's your job as a consultant to understand as well as deliver what they want. There are rarely projects where I say, no, I can't do that, or no, I'm not interested. For every call, it's always an art project of like, yeah, okay, let's interpret this and see what might come out of it. So that imposter syndrome has to go away very quickly if you choose to sell your services.
Yeah, for sure. Are there I want to ask this in a way that you can answer it, not ask you to reveal any confidential information, but are there particular characteristics of clients that you really love working with, that you get on the phone with them and you think, yes, this is going to be a fantastic project, a fantastic partnership? And equally, are there some clients you get on the phone and you think, no, I don't really want to do this, I'm going to find an excuse? And what are the characteristics?
It's the disruptors, the ones that see a change agent. I think those are the most helpful because they can start to understand and challenge and hopefully enlighten those around them. That I think vibes very well, as long as there's a structure in place and that there's deliverables that have to be met. Those are imperative, because you can't lose the plot and go on side quests and never get to the deliverable that you were intended to be. So those are the ones that work. The ones that are a little bit more challenging is the ones that don't pay attention to the craft. The antithesis of, hey, let's make it all up every single time, is that the work you produce is slop. And that's another sort of callback to design school or to art school of, no, everything you do, everything you showcase to anybody else has to be designed and has to be thought about and intentional. And you can't just be a purveyor of pixels that aren't crafted. So that attention to detail, even in the most innocuous of deliverables or settings, is something that I take very seriously. And there are those who don't, who just check the box and throw it in and see how it sticks, and give excuse or admit, or like, oh, this is just a draft. Like, there's no such thing as just a draft if you're showing it to somebody else. So those are some of the people I have challenge working with, because I'm not quite sure where their value lies.
Right. That attention to detail, that respect for the craft that you've spent so long learning about and honing through experience, is that what you would call humanist design? I've heard you mention that before.
Yeah.
Am I using the term correctly?
I think the humanist design is much less on the subjective interpretation of capital D design, and it is more on what emotions it conveys. The humanist design as this delivered in this way at this time generates this kind of emotion. And yes, a crafted deliverable will do that very well, where you can see that obviously somebody took care and thought. It's like the thank you notes. Again, I mentioned I had a birthday just recently. And it means the world when somebody writes you a handwritten note. It's something I did growing up all the time, but it's less so now because of email and texting. But that it doesn't matter what the card looks like. It matters that somebody wrote you a note. So I care very much about what the card looks like, but it really just matters what somebody wrote you. So as we look at humanist design principles in an age where everything is spit out by an algorithm, how do we start to showcase that there is a human in this loop? It's not just emojis. It's understanding of context and personalization, and really trying to be able to feel what the recipient is thinking at any point. And it will distinguish ourselves from what the algorithm might suggest we do, is that ability to assess and interpret the emotions of our customers.
Yeah. Thanks for explaining that. I mean, I think it's pretty obvious from this discussion that you're very tuned into your own preferences, what you like, what you don't like, but also you seem to notice those of others. You seem to spend quite a lot of attention noticing preferences of others and the skills that they bring to the table and how they complement your own skills. Do you think that attention to that kind of dynamic between people is necessary for humanist design, as you've just described it, or is it also quite possible for people who are more engineer-like, maybe more methodical, more rigorous, to do that humanist design?
Yeah. Is it possible? One of the conversations we're having internally, I guess within our industry, is when anybody can design, if anybody can jump into a piece of software application and type in, I want a website for a consulting practice, and we'll spit out what looks like a wonderfully designed website for a consulting practice. And that removal of what used to be a great value, whereas 20 years ago, you could get hired by the best company if you were able to produce such a deliverable at that quality. Yeah. And today it is with a stroke of the pen or a type of the finger, can you get that in an instant? And so it questions, when you have these interdisciplinary teams, engineers sitting next to product managers, sitting next to designer, if we can all produce each other's work. And I've told you that I've just deployed something that would have taken a team of engineers a considerable amount of time to do, if they didn't have these tools that we have today. Then if we're all sitting by each other's side and doing each other's work, then where does our value come from? And I think that humanist element of, okay, paying attention to an engineer may not think about the behavioral sciences or the reactions and the fears and apprehensions of a customer, existing or potential, as maybe somebody who does qualitative research, somebody who's used to conversing in a manner where it extracts, it provides vulnerability and response, it's neutral, it allows for those kinds of expansions that will inform product decisions. An engineer may be thinking something totally different. And I'm putting people into buckets right now, and I apologize for doing so. But the behavioral sciences are a very real, it's what made the difference between UI and UX 15 years ago, whereas design became commoditized. It had this introduction of freelancing websites, and you could ship it overseas, and then there was also the design patterns with the introduction of Apple and Android's operating systems, that you could color by numbers and create an app without having to make design decisions. And so that prioritization for who were traditionally considered designers got replaced by experience. And in order to find out experience, we had to learn these qualitative skill sets of being able to conduct interviews and gather requirements and use those to inform design decisions. And that's been sort of where my career has followed, is in much more of the strategy behind what to design versus what it looks like.
Right. I think that that brings me neatly to one final question to kind of close the circle. Do you think, like, if you think back to that summer camp when you were drawing airplanes and the first time you experienced flow, do you think there was ever a question that you would have ended up doing anything else besides what you're doing, or is it kind of inevitable?
As difficult as it is to continually tap into a creative voice, I consider myself lucky. I think some of it is physiological. I was a kid that had ADHD back before it was widely diagnosed.
Mm-hmm.
I think that kind of, I'll make a sort of euphemism of being stir crazy and constantly needing to fidget and reassess and, get out those jitters, did shape me to the point where if I had the stimulation of that creativity provides, then I could find myself in a good place. But if I didn't, then my career would have looked very differently. It's not to say I wouldn't have been as analytical or pragmatic, but I think that's the body-mind connection of what you are from a physiological standpoint also dictates, how you express yourself and where your career decisions go, and where you find satisfaction. And again, I know not everybody has that ability to tap into and recognize moments of pride or moments of joy and flow, and then are able to somehow maintain a living doing it. Those are two things that I think are the most fortunate in my life, and my journey.
Yeah, I think that's a very positive note to end on. I wish everybody would have the opportunity to spend at least some of their time in their lovely flow state and enjoying their work as much as you clearly do.
Good.
Thanks so much, Nick, for this insight into your very creative brain, your fast-moving brain.
Too fast. Too furious.
Yeah, thanks very much for your time.
Thank you, Dr. Lisa. I will talk to you soon.
Okay, cheers. Well, I hope you enjoyed that discussion with Nick as much as I did. I'll include his website and the link to his LinkedIn profile in the episode notes. So I thought that this discussion gave a great insight into Nick's creative working style, into what motivates him and how he does his best work. He's obviously someone who's very conscious of what puts him into a flow state. That's a state where time has no meaning because we're so engrossed in what we're doing, because we love it so much. And he also clearly values the different styles and skills that others bring. And when we can connect people in a team with the feeling that you will have got from Nick in his podcast, with openness, with an appreciation for differences, and with an awareness that an ask or a situation that's new and that could be scary, but we're going to do it anyway because the outcome's worth it. If we can be aware of the differences but build the connections regardless, that's where the magic happens. That's where our impact becomes astounding and where we can make a real difference as a team. So if you've got a friend, a colleague, a connection who you think would also like to listen to this podcast, and please do share the link with them. Every listen helps to build awareness of different thinking styles around us. And it helps to make our workplaces, our society more inclusive for people who think differently than we do, including neurodivergent people such as those with ADHD or autism. So all awareness that we can build really does help. If you're interested in learning more about this for your own team, perhaps you want to attract somebody with a thinking style like Nick's, but you're concerned about whether they might clash with the rest of your team, or perhaps you have a team with several people like Nick, plus those who are naturally more structured and rigorous, and they are not working well together, so you constantly need to step in. If you're interested in these or a similar scenario for your team, then please set up a free consultation with me. We'll have a chat about what you're seeing, and we'll have a chat about the extent to which neuroinclusion could help to make your team more connected and higher performing. There's absolutely no obligation. We could choose to build on what we discuss, or you could choose to take the value that you'll gain and continue on your own way. But whichever it is, I look forward to talking with you soon. Thanks for listening.